What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a review after 100% for Dragon Age Inquisition. Couple things to get out of the way. One, gonna spoil the crap out of this game. Not even gonna try to dance around spoilers. The main reason I'm looking into it is because of Dragon Age 4, because of the events of Dragon Age 4. I think most people are familiar with the story of Dragon Age Inquisition in some form anyway. But straight up, if you don't want spoilers, don't watch this video. Now, another thing, I like to review games after 100% because it lends some credibility to what I do and sets me apart from other YouTubers, and I have a playlist where I have reviewed many games after getting 100% achievements on them. But with that out of the way, Dragon Age Inquisition was a game that I played when it released. However, I never played any of the DLCs, and Trespasser specifically sets up the fourth game, which is currently in development. So I was like, I should probably go back and play through this at some point, and then naturally make content about it. Now, this is specifically the Game of the Year edition that is available on Steam, that of course has achievements that were added last year to enable you to actually get 100% on it. This comes with all the DLCs, all the patches, all that jazz. So in theory, it's the best version of said game. That said, truth be told, I've never played Origins or 2, which I realize is like gamer blasphemy to a lot of people, but here we are. I'll play them at some point, but I'm telling you that this is my perspective on the game, having never played the others. So, for those who have never played the game, we're going to start with a basic plot setup. So basically, you are someone who was attending the Conclave, which was a meeting of like the Chantry, which is the religious group, or the main religious group of the world here. And they are bringing together mages who have recently rebelled against their, not masters, but keepers, shall we say, the Templars. So the way this works in this world is that the Templars keep a short leash on mages, who are basically considered like walking swords. Mages are very dangerous, because a mage who can't control their powers is a conduit for demons, because mages draw their magic from this thing called the Veil, which is what separates this world from the world of the spirits. So basically, mages are a conduit between both. This leads them to be susceptible to corruption and demonic possession. So the answer to this for a long time was that the Chantry set up the circle, as they called it. Basically, mages would be put in a circle, which is like an academy or something almost, and moreover, they are connected with a Templar. Templars are specially trained at killing mages, basically, and suppressing a lot of magic. Now, mages will train until they have to pass a sort of trial, and if they fail that trial, they are then made tranquil. Being made tranquil basically means they strip the mage of all emotion, which cuts off their power and their ability to access magic. So already, a lot of drama between these two factions, because recently, the mages just flat out rebelled against this setup, and the Chantry called the Conclave trying to make peace. However, at said Conclave, and as the intro to the game actually shows us, there was an attack, and a woman called the Divine, which is the leader of the Chantry, is then killed. Your character apparently walked in on this and is actually considered a suspect, which is like the opening scene of the game. Moreover, this explosion that killed the Divine seems to have ripped open the veil right above the area, and they are calling this tear the Breach. It's very large, it's letting demons pour through, and it's a real problem. However, when this happened, for some reason, your character is left with a mark on their left hand. By the way, real quick aside, this annoys the crap out of me. The cover art for this game shows the anchor being on the character's right hand in the imagery, but in-game it's always on your character's left. I don't know what that is, it drives me crazy. But nonetheless, you're left with this anchor, which is like a mark of sorts that has very similar magic to the Breach. However, as you very quickly learn, as the intro plays out, the anchor actually allows you to close these rifts that are forming because of the Breach. Now, you're able to fairly quickly clear your name by helping out here. However, nonetheless, there is a giant hole in the sky and it needs to be fixed quickly. However, the main powers that be are literally at each other's throats, as I just explained. So this is when the characters that have opened up the game with you, which is Cassandra specifically here, who actually throws down this ancient book, shall we say, that grants the Chantry the right to declare an Inquisition. And basically, she declares an Inquisition to deal with the Breach in the sky, hence the name of the game, obviously. We have to start figuring that out. So that's the basic setup. We're actually going to get into it more in the world building section of this video, because truthfully, this is probably going to be fairly long. Alright, so before all that intro takes place, we actually get to make our character. Now, this is primarily done by simply picking a race, a class, and your appearance. So picking your race as well as your class kind of auto-assigns you a background. For instance, a human mage can be like a noble Trevelyan or whatever from that like family. You'll have been a part of the Ostwick Mages Circle, things like that. But if you're a member of the Qunari race, regardless of what you were doing, you were a member of this mercenary group and your position in that group would have changed. So it kind of gives you a little background to go into the story with. However, the races themselves are human, dwarf, elf, or Qunari. Qunari are really the only unique ones there, and they are basically giants with horns coming out of their head for the most part. And they live by a very strict set of rules called the Qun, or the Qun, I don't know. But either way, it's very different from the rest of the world. And in their society specifically, mages are like literally slaves. They are chained, bound, and used as tools. Again, because of their potential for demonic corruption. However, they take it much more drastically, I guess. So the other thing you can pick here is class. So within each class, you can kind of pick a specialization, if you will, like two-handed warrior or weapon and shield warrior, that kind of thing. But basically it's warrior, rogue, or mage. There's no like stats or anything to pick out, nothing like that. However, your race and class combination, in addition to giving you that background, will actually give you specific speech options specific to that background as well as your race class combination. So being an elf might give you conversation options, being a human might give you conversation options, being a mage might give you conversation options, having the human mage background might give you conversation options. So just a lot of stuff like that. But with that out of the way, let's talk builds and difficulty a little bit. So there is a decent amount of build variety in the game. Regardless of what like specialization you chose for your class at the beginning of the game, you have access to all the skill trees available for that class. So even if you picked a two-handed weapon fighter, you can still then become a weapon and shield fighter if you prefer. So no need to worry there. However, you do get a specialization class once you reach Skyhold. Skyhold is like the big hub of the game that you operate the Inquisition out of once you get a ways into the game. Once you reach it, you can pick a specialization class. Warrior, Rogue, and Mage all have 3 specializations that they can actually choose from. Now, this is treated more like a prestige class from like a tabletop game, say like Pathfinder or D&D, so I'll probably just call them prestige classes from here on out because it's hard to differentiate like the two-handed weapon fighter thing versus these. So basically once you reach Skyhold, you'll do a little war table mission, which we'll get into, and then you can pick your prestige class, if you will, from a list of 3. And you'll basically have to complete one side quest for the one you want to become, and then you'll get to choose it. Now that is locked. You won't get the others if you choose one. Choice of 3, you get 1. Now all of that combines into a decent amount of build variety. Some stuff obviously pairs better with things than other things. For instance, if you're going for a ranged rogue type, you maybe don't want to then pick up the more melee-focused prestige class. But nonetheless, you're free to do as you will there. So let's talk difficulty now. The main game, discounting the DLCs, is not terribly difficult. This game was marketed as like a tactics thing, and I think the main game stays fairly true to that. Even if you're not like super well geared, in most situations, if you know what you're doing and you can set up your party well as control the battlefield, so to speak, you should have a decent time of it. Even on Nightmare, it's not that bad. And then, for some reason, the DLCs are outrageously tuned to be way higher. Just for simple comparison, here's me fighting the last boss on Nightmare difficulty for the main game. You'll see here how I'm not really taking a ton of damage. I'm actually just kind of wrecking this dude. Now, here's a random group of enemies from one of the DLCs. For some reason, with the DLCs, they decided to just go, every enemy gets to one-shot you on Nightmare difficulty. And yeah, you can work around it. I'm not saying it's so super hard. It's just that it took one type of difficulty from the main game and then went in the exact opposite direction for the DLCs. All of the DLCs are like this, all of them. Now, that said, in addition to the actual difficulty, we then have trials. Trials were added with the Trespasser DLC, which was the last one, and these basically allow you to modify certain parts of the game to offer you a unique challenge. These allow you to do things like half your experience gain, get rid of the supply caches, which allows you to refill your health potions. Just a lot of stuff like that. You can make random enemies become twice as hard. So this kind of mixes things up a little bit if you would so choose. Now the last thing I want to talk about, difficulty, before we kind of move on to the bulk of this review here with the world building section, again, with the Trespasser DLC, I believe it was, they added this thing called the Golden Nug, and basically what it allows you to do is synchronize collectibles. But most importantly, it allows you to, once you have finished the game once, to then sync up all of your crafting schematics, which are considered a collectible, to the cloud, and then on your next playthrough, then go to the Golden Nug, which will now be in your little hub area, use it, and basically download all the crafting schematics for that playthrough. So it's very easy to run through the game the first time on like normal, get all the crafting schematics together, then go get them for your new playthrough, and then have like amazing gear crafted very quickly that'll allow you to just wreck things even on Nightmare. Basically, in summation, the story and main game, not so bad. The DLC difficulty is just weird. But with that out of the way, let's talk world building. This is going to be a fairly extensive part of this review. So first things first for the world building, you get to choose a world state for the previous game's decisions. So you can do this, I believe, through Dragon Keep or something like that. They have like a website thing that'll keep track of this for you or let you create save files, if I'm not mistaken, to do this with. But basically, you can log your major decisions from the previous games and then import them into this game to make a world state. However, the game does have a default world state for people like me who have never played those games. So that'll kind of set you up. Now, for the most part, the game plays out the same way, but like characters and stuff will change if you mess around with this. Now, outside of that, we are, of course, leading the Inquisition eventually. We start out as just a member, and then we're promoted to leading the Inquisition a little ways into the game. So basically, you're helping out the Inquisition because you need to close this breach. And as such, you need to help the Inquisition gather allies and power out in the wilderness, which then kind of leads you into the game's kind of big open world hubs. So I would call this probably semi-open world for the most part. You travel from place to place, but these hubs can be pretty big. They are pretty well imagined. It's a very diverse landscape. They're very pretty, in my opinion, for lack of a more descriptive word. The problem here is that most of them are filled with content that sucks. If you were waiting for the part where I complained about the hinterlands, it's now. So the hinterlands is like the first big place you get sent to, and it's probably the biggest of these hubs. If it's not the biggest, it's up there. It's definitely one of the bigger ones. And again, it's filled with content that is terrible. Most of the other hubs are actually a little smaller, a little more focused, and most of their content isn't as fetch questy. But the hinterlands, I don't know what they were thinking here. I guess they were trying to go like big for the intro, but then they didn't have a lot of content to fill this place with. And it's like every time you turn around, someone is throwing some dumb quest where they're like, hey, go to the other side of the map and then like get this thing and then like come back. And that's the whole quest. Thanks. It's like that, but like without exaggerating, probably 2 to 3 dozen times. Now, that's not to say everything in the hinterlands is bad. There is content there I enjoy. It's just that there's so many pointless little quests that just didn't need to be there. Now, I mention this here simply because this is a terrible way to start a game. Just point blank, it is. So you have this really cool setup. You're starting to lead this Inquisition, and then you're just like, hey, go do these random tasks for me that in no way serve the plot. But I'm actually forcing you to do them because you need to get power together. Power is basically the Inquisition resource you need to advance the story. Now, if you're doing all of the side content, you'll have it in spades. However, in order to advance the game and do the main story missions, if you will, you need to gather power. And then you have to go to the war room, where you can then spend that power on opening up new areas, as well as doing the main story missions. Now, at the war table, you can also complete a lot of other optional missions that will grant you things like resources, crafting, unique schematics, unique items, stuff like that. It's here, you can do it. It's not necessary by any means, but these will take anywhere from like 10 minutes to a whole day to complete, and that is real time. It passes even when the game is turned off. Personally, it's not bad. I like the idea. It's not terrible by any means. It's not like your advisors are doing anything else when you're not around, so the idea of sending them out on missions for the Inquisition, I think, kind of helps fill the world out. And then, you get some bonuses. But again, you don't actually have to do any of these, and doing these optional ones doesn't keep you from doing the main ones at any time. But the main thing to note here is that you need to spend power at the war table to open up new areas and do the main missions. Which leads me back to the boring hinterlands quests, because they drop you into this area, and it's one of like 2 places you can go at the start of the game, and you have to get power to open up the other area. So you're at least forced to be here for a little bit, and it's easy to get lost in the side quests and then be like, why am I doing this? It's just a weird start to the game, I guess, is my point. Now, that said, not all the side quests are terrible. I do want to make that clear. There are some good ones that kind of delve into lore and stuff here and there. It's just that most of them are terrible. Moreover, there are tons of collectibles, so a lot of this is stuff that will decorate Skyhold. Once you actually get access to Skyhold, you can fix it up and customize the decorations and things. There's also the Ocularium shards, or however it's pronounced. Basically, you'll find these skulls with crystals in their eyes, and you can look through them to find shards in the world, and then you can get those shards, and once you do a war table mission that allows you to figure out what they are, they're basically keystones that open doors in this one secret part of the map. And basically, the more you find, the more of this temple you can explore. It gives you resistances and stuff. That's probably the only collectible that's worth doing, because those resistances and items you get out of that temple are pretty good. Other collectible type thing are the astrariums. I would actually recommend you do those as well. Basically, you just solve a short puzzle, and any area that has an astrarium has 3 of them. If you solve all 3 in an area, you open up a vault in that area, and you again get a bunch of good items and stuff, so that one's also worth doing. All the other collectibles I would not care about. I have complained a bit about the world building here, but let's talk about some of the positives. So for starters, very good lore. Like the back and forth between the Templars and the mages and everything, really cool. I liked that a lot. So I'm really into like medieval fantasy type stuff, and Dragon Age really hits the nail on the head for that for me, which is why I am excited to go back and play the others at some point, because this is a lot of really cool lore, really kind of builds the game, even though it's not the focus of this game for most of it, outside of like one of the DLCs. There's the stuff with the Darkspawn, which are like these undead type monsters that rise up because of this blight disease I don't fully understand, but they're usually controlled by an archdemon that these dudes called the Grey Wardens actually come in and fight all the time. Like that's their whole purpose in life, the Grey Wardens, is killing an archdemon, which there's apparently some ritual that involves drinking demon blood that apparently allows them to do this, called the Joining. It's a whole thing. It's a lot of just really cool lore like that, and I loved it. But moreover, as you are exploring some of these areas, you can actually run across 3 keeps in the game that you can liberate from enemies, and then the Inquisition just takes up shop in these keeps, and they function as like main hubs just out in the game world that you can then use and craft weapons and things like that from, which you can normally only do in your like big hub area. In addition to this, you can also unlock war table operations by exploring the world, and then unlock new areas of the world, even like inside little instance areas. You can go to, say, a broken bridge, plant a flag down, which unlocks the war table operation, and then you can go complete that operation, and then the Inquisition just fixes that bridge, and then you can go explore this new area. So stuff like that I actually thought was really cool. Just kind of all of that together really makes you feel like the Inquisition is having a real impact on the world, and I liked it for that specific reason, because you could argue, why don't they just put the bridge in there, right? However, from a world building perspective, I like the idea that the Inquisition is having this profound impact on the entirety of the world that they are engaged in. Now, I've talked about like your main hub area for a while. So originally, this is a place called Haven. Now, once you've done the first few missions, which involve either recruiting the mages or the Templar to help you close the breach, you then do so. You seal the breach, at least temporarily. And then either the mages or the Templar, depending on which one you recruited, because that choice is a choice you have to make, the opposite faction will then be led by the main bad guy, called Corypheus. This dude attacks Haven, basically forces your Inquisition out of it, because he just wins this battle here, and you and what's left of the Inquisition has to just find a new place, and you come to Skyhold. But on your way, you learn that the reason the breach was opened is that Corypheus was trying to do something, and the anchor that is on your hand was intended for Corypheus, and due to an accident and you just kind of being there where you shouldn't have been, the anchor wound up on your hand instead. Now, Corypheus thinks you're dead for the time being because a mountain kind of fell on you. You manage to pick the Inquisition back up, lead them to Skyhold, and then Skyhold becomes your like main fortress area for the Inquisition. Now, as I mentioned, you get to decorate Skyhold, but more importantly, once you get there, you also get to do the side quest called Sit in Judgment. Every time you go up against an enemy and you have the option to keep them alive, you should, because then you can bring them back to Skyhold and pass judgment on them in an Inquisition sort of style. Depending on the options available to your character, like speech-wise from your Inquisition, because what I haven't mentioned yet is Inquisition perks, but we'll get to that in just a second. Depending on the options available to you, you can then pass judgment on whoever this person was. And you can either choose to just like straight up kill them, you can put them to work, you can exile them, you can just keep them in prison for however long. But the utilitarian thing to do is usually to put them to work, because more often than not, this results in a war table operation that will then actually give you a reward of some sort. But also, it really does make you feel like this inquisitor of an Inquisition to be passing judgment on the people that you have went out into the world and stopped. Now, the last thing I want to mention for the world building, I don't really like the power mechanic for the main missions. So the main missions are like instanced affairs. Basically, you'll go out into the open world, you'll gather power, like I mentioned, by doing random stuff, closing the fade rifts that are around, for instance, helping the local populace of that area, capturing keeps, doing all of this stuff to gather power. Then you go back to your war table, you spend that power on the main mission, which then lets you start it. I don't like this a lot. So it kind of makes sense, but it feels like a way of just dragging playtime out. Like, I kind of get what they were going for in the sense that, like, this upstart Inquisition can't just go around and do stuff. You got to build up your rapport, basically. But for me, it's like, wouldn't that have been easier if you just, like, you know, wrote more story? So because of that, I'm not wild about the power mechanic for the main missions. Because once you actually look at the main missions, there's not a lot of them. There's like less than 10 actual main story missions because they time gated out with all this other stuff and long cinematics and just longer missions. And, you know, like it's not bad exactly, but again, it just feels like they were trying to drag the playtime out, and I'm never going to be a fan of that. But with that out of the way, let's actually move on and talk about the combat of the game. So, combat is interesting. So, it's basically a real-time with pause system, but in third person. So I remember when they were marketing this game, they were all about like, oh, it's a big tactical RPG and you can pause it and overhead and like direct your companions and stuff, which we'll get into here in a minute. And yeah, that's basically true because you can just pause the combat with, I believe it's the T button, and then kind of go in and kind of assign your character's actions. But it doesn't work that well, and what I find is usually better is just to set up your companion's AI, which you are able to do, or like their basic behaviors, if you will, while you're not controlling that character. That's usually more effective just by itself than actually trying to micromanage each character. That said, the AI in this game isn't great, especially for your companions. A lot of time they'll stand in like the stupidest place possible, and you have to manually go move them. But again, that's not really like a tactics thing. It's usually easier to just take control of that character and move them yourself. Because even if you tell them to go somewhere, the AI is really dumb and they usually can't figure it out. So a lot of times just the automated stuff is the way to go, and then just move people yourself as needed is what I found useful. But as I mentioned, there are skill trees by class plus your prestige class. There's a good amount of build variety. But the problem is, it's basically all like the same stuff. There's a set amount of enemy types. There's a lot of enemies, but they all come in like generic types, if you will. There's like the heavy hitter two-hander guy. There's the sword and shield guy. There's the major archer in the background guy. And the second you learn how to deal with those, congratulations, you've figured out combat. Every fight for the rest of this game is basically going to be the same. I don't hate it. It's not bad. It's just that it lacks a lot of depth that it tries to convey that it has. And this might just be where I'm picky because I play a lot of CRPGs, which are basically all about combat and customization of classes and stuff and giving you all these options for combat. But this, it's really, you're kind of pigeonholed into a few different builds because that's all there is available. And combat just feels real samey. That said, outside of the limited AI setup that I kind of mentioned, there are also focus abilities. Your main character gets one called Mark of the Herald, I believe. This happens after Corypheus attacks your first hub, Haven. This is a big AoE that will just flat out insta-kill weak enemies, which is nice. But basically, every time you attack enemies, you'll fill a focus bar, and then you can spend that focus on your big like capstone-style abilities that all of your prestige classes will usually give you a version of, in addition to the unique one that your main character gets. In addition to this, there are potions, tonics, and grenades you can also find. First, you have to find the recipe for them, and then you can add them to your character's like potion slots and use those. Last thing I want to talk about with the combat is what the difficulty actually affects. Primarily, it's damage immunities or resistances for enemies, as well as just how hard they hit. That's primarily what the difficulty actually does. So on casual, which is the lowest, nothing is immune or resistant to anything. I can hit a fire demon with a fire attack and it will just do regular damage. However, on like normal or something, it will be resistant to fire damage, where it'll still deal damage, just not as much. And then on nightmare difficulty, a fire demon is immune to fire damage, and you have to use its opposite element, cold damage obviously, to do any real amount of damage. And the same goes for like mages and stuff. They'll be immune to one type of elemental damage, and you have to use the opposite one to deal damage. So there's a lot of that, because that's basically how they handle the difficulty. Again, Nightmare's not bad. I would actually recommend you play on normal just to familiarize yourself with all the abilities and stuff available to you. But once you kind of know what to use when, Nightmare's a breeze. Discounting, of course, the DLC. With that out of the way, let's talk companions. So, I liked all of them, actually. Now that said, there are some that I dislike their personality, but I still think they were a well-written character, because all of them are very true to themselves. Some of them can flat out leave if you piss them off enough. There's only a few, by the way, not all of them. There are like 5 or so, I believe, companions of, I think it's like 9, that will just straight up never leave no matter what you do. Some of them, a handful of them, will actually leave, though, if you annoy them enough. But basically, there's an influence system that you can't see, and it's like a 0 to 100 scale or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, is the actual like gameplay metric behind the scenes. And if it gets to negative 35 for like 4 of them, they will just bail. There are a ton of romance options depending on your character's sex. However, in addition to companions, you can actually romance a lot of the Inquisition's advisors and even, I believe, the lead scout, thanks to a DLC, if I'm not mistaken. So if romance is your thing, there are a ton of options. Not going to go into all of them, but there's a lot. So there are 3 companions that you will get no matter what you do, and these are Varric, Solus, and Cassandra. Now, from what I understand, Varric and Cassandra are like holdovers from previous games. Real talk, Varric is my favorite companion. I love that guy. He is well done. He's such a cool dwarf. Solus is an apostate mage, but we'll get into him more later. And then Cassandra is a seeker. Basically, the Templars, in order to fuel their abilities, take this substance called lyrium. Seekers learn to do the same thing, but without the lyrium, through just years of ritual and dedication. That is what Cassandra is. She's really cool. I actually like Cassandra a lot. Usually my first choice for a romance character. But in addition, there is Sarah. Sarah is actually sort of a highwayman, if you will. She's very much so about protecting the common folk from like nobility and stuff. Very much a Robin Hood type. There is Dorian. Dorian is a Tevinter mage. So with my explanation of the Chantry and mages and Templars and everything, in Tevinter, mages are the ruling class. It's kind of like the opposite of the Qunari and like Ferelden and Orlais where the game takes place. Tevinter is like the mages rule everything, and it's a very different type of society, if you will. But Dorian is from there. He comes to help out with the breach. There is Cole, who is technically not a person at all. Hard to explain exactly what Cole is. He's kind of like a spirit that took the form of a person, but like almost entirely. But the main thing, I guess, is that he's not human. There is Iron Bull, who is actually a member of the Qunari, the race and the people. He is actually a member of the Ben Hassarath. I don't know how to pronounce these things. But regardless, he's a member of this, what is essentially a spy network for the Qunari. And he tells you this up front. He's just like, this is who I am. Basically, they want to keep an eye on what this Inquisition's doing. You can let me join or not. He has some cool stuff where you can like push him towards either embracing the Qunari or embracing his new life as a mercenary captain, which is what he's doing as a cover. There is Vivienne. She is like the leader of the mages that didn't rebel, but she is a mage. And then there's Blackwall, who starts out as a Grey Warden, and then you find out very quickly he wasn't actually a Grey Warden, but you can actually help him become a real Grey Warden. Now, all these companions have really cool stories. I liked them a lot. I enjoyed interacting with them. Some of them definitely have more going on than others, but as I mentioned, Varric, Solus, and Cassandra are the only ones you have to take on. The rest of them are optional. You can tell them to get bent and get lost if you want. And while I wouldn't recommend it, because, the more the merrier in these kinds of games, however, I just like that they added the option to just tell these people that, no, you don't want them around. You can kick some of them out of the Inquisition even after they've joined. And overall, I liked it. Now, let's talk DLC. So, the Jaws of Hakan and the Descent DLC are different but similar. So Jaws of Hakan adds or Hakon I think it's actually pronounced, but it adds another hub area that you can then explore. Do a bunch of side quests, and then there's like a little bit of a main story to it. And then there is the Descent. The Descent has you investigating a Darkspawn resurgence in the Storm Coast area, where you basically get to descend into the deep roads, which is where the Darkspawn often come from, and you can kind of investigate a disturbance. So the Jaws of Hakan had really cool lore, but it doubled down on like the worst part of the game, which was go do all these random side quests. And the main plot of it wasn't bad. I do, again, hate the scaling for this. Like, the difficulty of these DLCs from Nightmare, just from playing the main game to then doing the DLC, is outrageous. And then the Descent is kind of the same way. The main plot of the Descent is really cool. I liked that a lot. It kind of goes into what Lyrium actually is. However, what the Descent kind of focuses on is combat. It's really about like mastering the system's combat, but as I mentioned earlier, for me personally, the combat wasn't that engaging. So having a DLC centered around combat, That said, again, story was really cool. Now, the Trespasser DLC, we have a lot to talk about here. As I mentioned, this sets up the Dragon Age 4 that is in development. As you actually learn when you end the game, Solus has actually been a bit of a double agent. Turns out Solus is actually an ancient elf called Fen'Harel. Now, to hear him describe it, he does not consider himself a god, and after playing the Trespasser DLC, I'm inclined to agree. Basically, throughout that DLC, you can learn that in the ancient times, elves, who were kind of the ruling party, so to speak, were eventually put down and used as slaves, and this largely happened because a group of them, called the Inuvaris or something like that, was like the ruling class of elves, and essentially they were just insanely powerful mages, like beyond anything the current world could even comprehend. And some of them started using this power to declare themselves as gods. Fen'Harel, Solus, didn't care for this. He started setting these slaves that these other ones were taking. He set them free. And because of this, he kind of got this following of these freed elven slaves that then kind of tried to elevate him to that status of godhood, which he always rejected. However, he was just one person. And against all of these other elves who eventually killed his one ally, he was forced to construct the veil itself. So as it turns out, Solus is the reason that this veil between the real world, if you will, and the spirit world exists. He made it. However, the ancient elves were used to living in tandem with the veil, this kind of realm. A lot of their great works and stuff operated off that. So when the veil was constructed, it just shattered a lot of these places. And as he put it, broke his people. So throughout this DLC, you learn that what he's going to do is find a way to tear the veil back down to set his people free. Now, he doesn't do this out of malicious intent. He's not trying to hurt the world that exists, but in tearing this veil down, he knows that it's going to do the same thing again, but to a different people. However, he needs to, in his eyes, make up what he did to his own people. Now, if you are Solus's friend, he genuinely does not enjoy this task. You can tell from the conversation with him at the end of Trespasser that they genuinely tried to be like, he's doing this because he has the weight of an entire people on his shoulders, and that especially after traveling with you, someone who showed him the good that this world can be, he does not relish having to destroy this world to bring about his own people's livelihood again. Now that said, the DLC itself is fairly short, but moreover, it deals with what happens to the Inquisition after the actual game ends. Now there is a couple of options here, because in the main story, you eventually deal with Corypheus, you put him down, of course, which ends the immediate threat of the breach and what Corypheus was trying to do, which was make himself a god. However, Trespasser takes place 2 years after that. So while you're learning about all of this stuff with Solus actually came across a plot because he had left the Inquisition after you defeated Corypheus, I should probably mention that. While he was traveling around through these sort of gateway realms that the ancient elves had made, he discovered a plot by the Qunari to invade the south because of what happened with the breach and everything, and he kind of sets your Inquisition on it, which you are then able to stop this plot, which is kind of the rest of the focus of the DLC. However, you at the end of it get to make a decision. So you will have likely helped the Chantry choose a new divine, because remember, she died at the beginning of the game, You can help them choose a new one. You can side your Inquisition with the Divine, keep it intact. But basically the idea is that the Inquisition is starting to be a hub of corruption, as all powerful organizations eventually turn into. People are infiltrating it with their own spies, that kind of thing, which is how the Qunari were planning their attack and invasion. So just a lot of that stuff going on, so you can decide to actually dissolve the Inquisition because their purpose has been fulfilled. The breach is closed, Corypheus has been stopped, which was the actual reason for the Inquisition's formation, and this would, in theory, allow you a more secure group of people, like, Inner Circle, to go search for Solus and try to stop whatever he's trying to do for the next game. But to sum it up, you get to make that decision, and moreover, Trespasser's entire purpose is to set up the 4th game, which is apparently supposed to take place in Tevinter. Alright, so let's talk positives, negatives, and then wrap this thing up. Positives. I really liked the story. While it can feel a little, I don't want to use the word time-gated exactly, but intentionally drug out, it really tries to wrap up all the plot threads it brings in the previous game. I liked the story. I don't necessarily like the pacing of it, but the story itself was very good. Also, the dragon fights, because this game is called Dragon Age, and I have yet to actually mention the dragon fights. Here we are. So you can fight some dragons in this game. That said, these are cool in like a cinematic type of way. Mechanically speaking, they're kind of dumb. Remember how I mentioned the AI in this game is terrible? Most of these dragon fights can actually be beaten by literally just standing far enough away from the dragon that its AI won't activate, and you can hit it with a mage's staff still and kill them. All but 3 of the dragon fights can be won this way. It's ridiculous. But they are nonetheless really cinematic if you actually engage in them in the way they were intended to be engaged with, and I liked that. Moreover, decisions matter. You can actively see the Inquisition affecting the world. You see that in real time. You're taking keeps over, you're repairing things. People will start reacting to what you're doing. You'll see Skyhold transform over the course of the game. You're sitting in judgment. You have all these effects with the war table. You just really feel like the Inquisition is actively changing the world, and I really liked that a lot. And a second note on that, because of that exact same thing, it really feels like you're leading this Inquisition. It feels like you are actively taking them and making them this real organization that has the power to change the world, and I liked that a lot. Bit of a power fantasy, but whatever. Negatives. So, let's talk negatives. Pointless filler quests. Oh my god, there's so many. Why are these here? You could have cut all of these out and had the same game. And you probably could have tailored in these gigantic areas a little bit, made it a little more focused, made them more dense, if you will. And I think it would have made for a better game. I think they tried to go a little too big in this regard, and I hate these fetch quests that are everywhere that serve no purpose. Also, I had some issues with the optimization, I guess you'd call it, late game. I don't know, most of the game was actually really well done, and then I got to some of the DLCs and the game would keep crashing and stuff like that, and it only really happened in the DLCs. The rest of the game was fine. So I don't know if that was a problem with the DLCs specifically or what was going on, but every hour or so the game would crash when I was in DLC areas. Don't know what that was about. The combat can feel a little samey, as I mentioned. That can kind of get old, especially with as long as this game kind of goes if you do everything. But to wrap all this up, put a bow on this fairly long review, at least for my standards, to give an actual full-blown opinion, I think this is a good game with too much filler. Again, they could have cut just a ton of this stuff out, had a more focused experience that I think would have been more enjoyable overall. But nonetheless, what they were trying to do shines through. And because of that, I still really enjoyed the game, and it has me excited to go back and eventually play the other games and kind of see where this got started, because the lore and everything that is presented in this is really cool. I enjoyed it a lot. I can tell just from playing this and kind of experiencing some of those concepts how exploring those in other games would have been awesome, and I see why people enjoyed this franchise so much. Also, this game is $40 with all the DLC on Steam right now. That's a great deal for the amount of content you're getting. Don't have a problem with that at all. 100 hours for $40, that is not a bad way to go. So, there you go guys, there is a review of Dragon Age Inquisition after 100%. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. And if you made it this far, maybe consider joining the channel as a member for $1 a month. You get some emojis you can use in chat. Your name goes in the credits, in the description, as well at the end of the video. Moreover, maybe consider even purchasing some merchandise from my shop. There's a link in the description for that. That goes a long way towards helping support the channel and creating more content like this. So, regardless of any of that though, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I could not do this without you guys. So thank you, may you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.